Sam, defend your team, because they haven't won.
Oh my God. Strap yourselves in, it's another 1 hour episode.
Oh yeah.
Spike defused.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Press for to Defuse, your weekly spot for Valorant esports news and discussion. It's just the two of us this week. It's just me and Paul. We're going to be bringing you all the news, all the chat. Sam had to go flee into the wilds of South Africa. I'm not sure what she's doing. She said something about an ancient talisman and a vision quest, and we'll see if she makes it back for next week and what state she's in.
Maybe she can bring Nathan Drake along.
Yeah, I mean,
she could get Tom Holland. Like he's doing the Nathan Drake stuff.
I still can't believe that's a movie. Although of any video game property, that's probably the best like one-to-one translation to a movie, right?
We're getting off topic and we haven't been live for a minute yet.
There we go. All right, we won't talk about Uncharted.
Desperately in need of Sam back.
We won't talk about Uncharted. We'll talk about Valorant instead. It's the game y'all came here to listen about, talk words. Words are good. Let's hop in.
Really good.
We've got our first segment. It's called Run It Back. It's where we talk about the news of the last week. And honestly, this one, the Run It Back, is actually shorter than usual because everybody's been playing tournaments and no one's been making roster changes. There are some things. And we'll start it off with Neil Zeno being announced as Dark Zero's coach. I think he's been working with them for a minute, so I don't know if this is a huge surprise here.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. But
I feel like it's been a minute since he was actually like on this, or at least like it's one of those things where most people like kind of knew it to a degree at the very least.
Yeah, this one I saw in that someone had put it in the outline, and my reaction to it was, "Is this news?"
Yeah, right. I think Sam like threw this one in the outline, and it was just like, "Hey, there you go." And
But let's
I mean,
talk about Dark Zero
it's
here. I think it's a
interesting,
good pulse
certainly,
check. Tell me about it.
right? To get the old G2 coach, I think that's really interesting. It just shows that. I mean, it shows one of two things, right? You can either interpret this as, oh, Dark Zero, they're shelling out big bucks, they're really trying to push to be one of those top teams, or you can show it as the G2 didn't end up doing as well as they could have toward the very, very end of last year. And maybe it's been, especially in the EMEA scene, not too many teams need coaches at this point. Either way, it's going to be really interesting to watch. Dark Zero's been a pretty decent team. I'm excited to see what they can do with a top tier coach.
Yeah, I think the thing that's most interesting to me is just sort of what it says for the pulse of the scene. I think it's a really good move by Dark Zero to invest in the coaching staff. I think it's something that we're seeing the importance of more and more in NA Valorant, and teams are starting to invest in it. And remember, at our end of year show, when we were sort of wrapping up, this is one of the things that I harped on, was that EU was winning the arms race when it came to support staff and coaching and investment in that. And now we're maybe seeing that flip a little bit. EU coaches being lured over. Like, I'm into it.
Buy all the coaches. Buy all the coaches. Buy the players.
Yeah.
We're just gonna be League of Legends. It's a Riot title thing, you know? NA, we have to buy the EU talent.
I don't even think we need to buy EU players. Like, I think the players exist in NA. I think there are obviously new talent coming up through the North American system. I really don't think you have to go afield to find talent. But support staff is something that has been lacking in North American esports in general. And there's, I think, a lot of bad habits carrying over from CS in some of these rosters, and the importance that they place on coaching, the importance they place on having the command structure somewhere outside of the players. And personally, I'm a huge fan of not having players make decisions like roster decisions and things like that. Frankly, I don't even think coaches should make roster decisions. I think in your ideal power structure, you have a manager, a general manager, who actually makes personnel decisions. Then the coach takes those personnel and tries to sculpt them into the best version of the team they can be. And the players are focused on being the best individuals and teammates they can be, not thinking about who's going to be on the roster and whether they want to make a change. Like, that's where my head goes. So it's exciting. Dark Zero has not had the results they want, I don't think. Obviously, this last VCT run was a little disappointing to them. They went out fairly early on. But this is definitely a step in the right direction, where you've got some talent on that roster. You bring in an experienced coach. You bring in a guy. You invest in that side of the team. And I think it might deliver some results. Moving on here. We got Oxygen Academy, which is there's more oxygen. North American Oxygen team. This is Nerfed's roster with Rustin, Redux, Ferdy. What do we make of this squad?
I think it's a little bit strange isn't the right word, right? It's odd for me for a org to pick up an academy roster.
Yeah.
That is like, it's in a separate region than like their main roster was. So you'd think, oh, okay, cool. They're like maybe just like trying to split branch into two regions and have two teams play in VCT, but they can't play in VCT. Redux is too young, right? So it's strange that like they saw ex-Flick baiters and went, hey, yeah, this is worth investing in. This is worth putting more money into, right? It's not terribly surprising considering I think Redux was already like a streamer for them or something, right? So like they had like the general foundation in this team already. So I'm not sure how much of an expansion monetary wise this was for them to get. It's good for branding, if nothing else, right? Like a lot of players like this team. Like, there's a ton of really popular guys on it. Every time I watch an ex-Flickbaiter stream, everybody in the chat is just going wild over him. Yeah. So I'm excited for him. It doesn't really change much, I don't think, right? I doubt that all of a sudden, like, Oxygen is just going to come in and be like, all right, now we're going to change this team and make it a VCT ready team. Like, you know, I doubt this does much other than just make it more stable for this lineup. And they've been doing really well in like tier 3 tournaments, like, you know, Nerd Street stuff, Night stuff. So I'm excited for him.
Now, the thing I'm curious about is, why is this the Academy roster? Because I don't think Oxygen has the Turkish team under contract anymore.
Because they did have a main team.
Yeah,
and now
Turkish
they
team.
don't.
I don't think they have anyone under contract. They have a female Turkish roster, I think, still.
Sure.
But I don't know. I guess the implication is that they're going to pick up another Turkish roster, maybe.
Or another roster somewhere.
Maybe this is a Gambit Youngsters situation where at some point they'll just drop the Youngsters tag, or they'll drop the Academy tag and it'll be the main team.
just gotta wait 2 years or 1 year, however old Redux is.
Yeah,
For
until
them
you
to
can compete
actually
in
be able to
VCT.
play VCT.
It makes sense, though. I mean, you invest in using the Academy moniker, you could probably pay less in contracts if we're being,
Sure.
the cynical businessy side of things. And then you hold on to a promising young player. Wait until they're of the age where they're able to compete here. So, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, keep an eye on it. I'm a huge, big Jimmy Nerf McFadden fan. Love that dude.
Fair.
So, I'm here for it. Always here for Nerf getting signed. And now we'll talk. I'm just going to do my quick aside before we go on here. The eternal cycle of Nerf teams. Oxygen, don't do this. This is what happens.
Okay.
Orgs sign a Nerfed built team. They're a good team. They're a promising team. Some of the promising young players are having results. Then they cut Nerfed because he's older and has other commitments and things like that and isn't a cracked out 18-year-old. And then suddenly the team is worse. It's happened like
Crazy
3 different times in Valorant,
Wild.
period. So I'm just saying, don't cut him. Recognize that there's an important piece that he provides, and don't make that change. Learn from history. Don't repeat the mistakes. Moving on here. Here's another piece of old news. Packing 10 is leaving Immortals. This isn't news. The tweet
Not
you can
really.
see is from January 7th. He's just actually off it now, and so this means Immortals is dead.
Yeah.
They don't exist.
Immortals are gone, right? I don't know if they're gonna come back either.
I don't think so.
Right? I feel like Immortals as an org is struggling across the board, if I'm not mistaken. I can't think of an esport where an Immortals team is doing well.
I'm not even sure. So the thing is, Immortals is owned by IGC, right? Which also owns MIBR, and also owns I think the Gamer Club. They own a lot of things associated with the Brazilian scene. So there's a lot of different brands there, and there is an MIBR team, right? So it's like, is this... do they want an Immortals roster and an MIBR roster? Like, where's the importance there? But clearly, Immortals, as we knew it in North America, the ultimate farm team is dead for the time being. They're done. They're not planting new crops. They're leaving this field fallow. And we'll see if they can re-nitrogenize the soil and maybe go to some crops in the future. This is an extended metaphor. They're done. Moving on. Let's talk about the X10 thing that happened here. This is from Reddit. A copy from VLR, a copy from this, that, and the other thing. But it seems to be the reality. I don't think this has been disputed that I've seen as of yet. And basically, the story is that the reason the players left X10 is because X10 got the payout for the champion skin sales, which was somewhere around, a bazillion dollars, and hasn't paid any of it out.
So scummy, dude. And you're like, we knew that this was gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right? That's the annoying part, is like back in late November or whatever, when Riot announced, hey, all the teams are getting a cut of the millions upon millions of dollars we make from the champion skin sales. We knew that it was going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, which for NA teams, EU teams is great, don't get me wrong. But it's literally life-changing for a lot of these like smaller regions that don't get influxes of cash a lot of the time. And we talked about it. There was this worry. Hey, what if they just yoink it? There's no way that this had been put in player contracts, right? There's no way that the X10 guys, or even, I would be surprised actually if this was the only team this happened to, right?
Yeah. No, that'd be shocking.
A lot of the other like smaller regions, there's no way that they were able to negotiate their contracts around, hey, what happens if we get this influx of cash? Because nobody knew it was going to happen. So X10 just decides to yoink it all, says goodbye. We'll buy a nobody team and use this money that you guys got us to fund us forever.
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting, I think, going back to your point about when this was first announced, I remember there was a tweet, and I think this was from owner, noted good old anti-vax coach, where he said, I wish we had known about this so we could negotiate into contracts, right? Like, Riot just dropped this. Yeah. There was, from my understanding, little to no communication that this was going to happen before they announced it and unveiled it to the public, which is, frankly, wildly irresponsible. I get that it's a new esport and like ultimately it's giving money to the ecosystem, which is good inherently, even if it's just going to the orgs. It incentivizes orgs being involved in esport, but not letting players know about it in any capacity means that they had no ability to negotiate their contract for it or negotiate a clause into their contract if they signed, which meant that they were entirely at the mercy of the org to do whatever they want if the money went straight to them, which it apparently did. And so, yeah, if you're X10, you have a choice, right? You can keep your roster, which, by the way, Patapan's gone to Overwatch League, and he was the most attractive part of your roster.
I gotta wonder if this has to do with it, though.
No, I think he probably went beforehand.
I mean, yeah.
That rumor was out before Champs, wasn't it? Like long before Champs.
Was it before Champs? I thought it was as Champs was happening.
No, I think they knew. I think that was known. Maybe it factors into it, but maybe not. Either way, you as an organization of X10 have $500,000 coming, 15 million bought. I don't know what their annual operating costs are, but I would wager this covers them for a couple of years. Like I would wager this funds the whole dang org for a while.
Based on Fox saying that the average salary is the 15,000 baht or $450 USD, that X10 is going to be operating until 21, 22 at this rate off the amount they just got from Champs. And it's that to me, it just makes it even more frustrating because you could literally, like, if the player's salary is so, because, the cost of living is different in, different parts of the world and, is different, a million different things that go into how much players get paid in different regions. But, like, if they're only making $450 as their salary, you give them each, like, 10 grand, and they are living, and it barely cuts into the amount of money that you actually got from Riot and Champions.
You're absolutely right. But the reality is they weren't contractually obligated and they could cut ties and then pick up another roster. And so that's what they're going to do. Is it moral? Hell no. Is it scummy? Hell yeah. But is it absolutely to be expected of a business in this situation? Yeah. If you didn't think this was going to happen, you live in fairy la la land of optimism, right? Like this is the most obvious shit ever. Yeah. You can see this coming a mile off. So, I mean, the reality is also like this is going to be how some of these SEA organizations work, right? You saw it with Bren, with their team then moving to Secret. The reason they did that is almost certainly money, right? International prestige as well, but money. Domestic Southeast Asian Filipino organizations not going to have the same payroll. It's an entirely different cost of living. The numbers that North American players make in comparison to what much more internationally competitive Southeast Asian rosters make, probably mind-blowing. So yeah, the X10 guys have a new roster. It's exist spelled that was Lakia's roster. God, what's the new roster for X10?
We should have it. There it is. Perfect.
No, that's X10's new roster. The former X10 guys also have
you're saying the
roster.
Former X10 guys went elsewhere. That's what you were talking about. Okay.
Yeah. Hold on.
Yeah. We talked about it. We talked about it like last week or something.
We did, but I forget the name of the roster. And I feel bad about that. Xerxia. They're part of Xerxia now, which sounds Persian to my ear, which is interesting for a Thai org. But hey, let's get it.
It's a dope name.
So I see Divinator in chat is talking about how players are being exploited by organizations and they're surprised that Riot doesn't have any protocols in place to protect them. Here's one of the things as well, if you want to take a more cynical view to this, which is that for as far as the champion skins bundle, that was designed to incentivize orgs. It really wasn't necessarily designed to incentivize players. If it goes to players, dope, awesome, great. But what you're saying to orgs is, look at how much the community is willing to invest in this. Look at how much we can build this war chest for one event super early on. We can share the spoils of this war chest with you. This makes it make sense for you to stay invested in this until we have more structure, more franchise, that kind of thing. This is worth it. This is worth your budget. Stick around, and this kind of stuff is going to keep happening. It is designed to incentivize investment into the scene, and that's what Riot wants to encourage. At the end of the day, there are going to be players. The more of them that can get salaried, the better. How you get those players salaried? You make it make sense for orgs to be invested. This is one of those situations where it's shitty and it's scummy and it's bad and it sucks for those players, but If you wanted to make it a payout to players, pay out the players. You could have easily done that if you're Riot. Say, you know, everyone gets an even split of your share. Every individual. You could even make it so that the org automatically gets a 50-50 split, and then the players split the other 50 among themselves. You could do that if you're Riot. They didn't. They gave it to the orgs and let the orgs do what they're going to do with it, and that's because they want to incentivize org investment.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and looking into the future, if Valorant ever wanted to go franchising, right? Stuff like that is a huge incentive. Hey, orgs, if you want to be a part of our franchise league that we're making in 2024 or whatever, look how much money that we can always make every single year from these skins.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cut of that. It's literally like, yeah, you know, you look at the way franchise leagues work with the initial investment, using the classic Overwatch League example. They're just like, give us 20 million. Oh, you want money back? No. Here, Riot's saying, like, when we throw that number out there about how much it's going to cost to get in, here's our proof of concept that this is going to make you money in the long run if you get invested in the short run. It makes a lot of sense.
Well, and imagine how much Riot can levy like team skins now, right? True. Hey, you want your org to have skins in game? Cool, pay us a bunch of money and you'll get a cut of it.
Yeah,
you'll probably return on investment pretty well based on how champions went.
They want to. The classic in esports is it is so damn hard to make money as an organizer, and as a tournament operator.
Yep.
Riot is a publisher and the TO. So they can take that money that they would normally want to be trying to scoop as the TO and slide it straight over to the orgs and make it a much more incentivized, much more attractive for orgs to be involved and invested. And it just kind of makes sense. But yeah, it sucks for...
It absolutely sucks for those players.
Because that is life-changing money, man.
Honestly.
Yeah, that's like, if that's a 5-man roster, 6-player, like you're getting 80 grand or whatever, like that's
that's 80 grand compared to their salary of $450. That's wild. Yep. That's wild. You just dropped like 20 years of money into their pocket.
You've literally moved entire social stratas with that kind of money. It's like, the Dota International win it once and just be loaded. It's I don't know. It sucks, but is entirely expected, is basically my conclusion, right? If you don't like this, it is on Riot to change the way it's paid out.
Yep.
Or, and I will say, now that this is known, now that it's known that there will be payouts, negotiate clauses in your contract for a split. Yep. Negotiate a split of revenue for anything associated with your team's performance, anything associated with your digital likeness or signatures or any of that, anything like this, make sure it's covered by a contract. Talk to lawyers, talk to agents. All right, moving on. Act 4 news. We got Act 4 news. There's good old Super Cakes, Anna Donlan, to tell us all about things. I saw one of the top responses to this tweet was like, I mean this in the most positive way possible, but she's got cool teacher vibes. And like, I can see it.
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
Give me your reaction here, Paul.
I think it's interesting, right? No maps for a while. Makes a degree of sense, right? There's 7. I feel like 7 is a comfortable amount for the next few months in Valorant. But also no agents for a while. I felt was weird. Like we were literally just talking last week with like Anders, like, we need another controller, just someone to challenge Astro. We need another initiator, someone to maybe, split time with Sova. But what we are also saying is those characters need to be nerfed. So it feels like Riot is just focusing on taking what's already existing in Valorant and adjusting it to its best state. I don't disagree, right? I think there are a lot of changes that need to be made, especially looking at like the first week of like NA VCT, right? Like if you look at the agent stats, it's literally just like Astra, Sova, Jet, all millions of playtime, Viper a ton of playtime, right? And then, you go down to the bottom of the leaderboard, guys like Omen, Yoru, and Phoenix getting absolutely nothing. So I'm excited to see how quickly this rolls out, because I feel like when you get to the point where you're like, hey, there's not going to be new content for a second. That means that you have to be patching very consistently, We don't want an Overwatch situation where it's like, don't worry, guys, we'll get you new content soon.
Oh,
and then the
God.
game goes 8 months without getting a patch. That's not going to happen. That's
No.
not going to happen with Valorant. It's
Not
not
even
going to be
remotely.
anywhere near that bad. But how consistently are they going to go for these patches, right? Like, we heard about the Yoru rework forever ago. Like 4 months ago at this point or something crazy, or 2 months ago. I don't remember. Either way, it's been a long time, and we haven't actually seen that hit the live version yet. So I'm wondering how frequent a lot of these balancing changes are going to be.
Yeah, I'm curious to see it. I also do want to say Divinator in chat had another question talking about the dynamic with franchising Valorant versus League of Legends. I'll be honest, I don't feel qualified to really speak on that. I don't have inside information about the future plans of franchising in Valorant, and I don't know enough
I have no idea
about franchising structure in League of Legends to really draw a comparison. What I will say is, once there are more established leagues, then you have more of an ability to pursue specific contract protections for players in the form of players' unions or agreements for organizations as far as how they have to deal compensation or salary structures of that kind of line, as we would have in a sports league. But that is more general statement. It's not specific because I don't have specific knowledge to share.
For sure.
So there are people who are more qualified to talk about that. I'm not one of them.
Yeah, agreed. I'm not really I don't get inside the money a lot of the time.
Yeah. Nah, Riot, hit us up. Give us the chance. When's franchising happening? Is franchise happening? I mean, Open Circuit works in FPS
I hope it
sometimes.
doesn't. I hope it doesn't happen soon. I want the scene to grow before we start like rigidly locking in things. You know, I feel like we have a lot of variation at the top of Valorant right now. There's not a ton of consistency, and I think we need to see some more consistency before franchising.
Yeah. Now, speaking to some of the points you were making about time, like obviously 7-map pool,
sure.
There's a certain other esport that's done a pretty good job with the 7-map pool. It makes a lot of sense from a ban perspective. Maybe it's the esport that Valorant has used as a skeleton to build upon their whole structure. A little CS game. But yeah, no, I think it makes sense to take a step back. What it does tell me is that we don't need to think about agent bans coming in anytime in the short term, right?
That is true.
Which was a question mark. I don't expect it to happen before the end of the year or even be considered before the end of the year, but this definitely reinforces that notion. Yeah, be interesting to see how they tweak things. If Anders gets his Sova nerf, he's so desperately craves.
I mean, they have to do something to Sova. I don't know if it's going to be what Anders wants, where he was like half the speed on the drone and just make it so a Sova has to be basically, make it out with the corner that he's checking. But they have to do something to Sova, man.
Here's the thing.
It's just ridiculous how much playtime Sova gets.
From a casual perspective, not a comp perspective, from a casual perspective, making things slower is always a tough sell because it doesn't feel good to go slow. It's just not fun. So that's a thing. But anyway, moving on here. We'll move on from Act 4 news. Masters Champion slots. We have the full details now, so let's take a little peek-a-poo at that. I think we had a pretty good idea of how this worked before. We've talked about it before, but now we've got the full deets. NA only has 2 slots because Riot hates us. BR has 1 slot dedicated. LATAM has 1 slot dedicated. And then there's a Brazilian LATAM slot that they get to fight over. EMEA gets 3 slots because they're Riot's favorite child. Korea, only 1 slot. And Southeast Asia, 2 slots. Ooh, which will also include OCE, which is interesting. And then Japan still gets 1 slot.
I think that's why SEA gets the 2nd slot, right? Is because they want to include OCE. I was kind of surprised that they didn't do something like with BR and LATAM, how they have them split that 2nd spot. Like, hey, whoever's best, like fight it out. I was surprised they didn't do something like that with like Korea, Japan, and SEA. But it also gets like kind of a mess servers wise, if I'm not mistaken, depending on like where you are, especially if you include Oceania into it, right? Like if finals ended up being an Oceania team versus a Korean team, like that ends up being kind of a mess to do an online qualifier for.
I think with servers in Guam, I know at least in CS, they found some decent solutions ping-wise for Southeast Asia to Oceania. I don't know about going north in towards Korea and Japan, though. I suspect that would get real hairy.
Yeah, so, I mean, that makes a degree of sense to me, right? Plus, SEA did pretty all right, in Champions, so give them a 2nd slot. Why not?
Yeah, No, I think it makes sense. And I think that this makes more sense about why NA lost a slot, because for some bizarre reason, Riot had decided that Oceania would compete through NA. And so in their mind, that's a whole other region kind of glommed in. So another slot. Now they've glommed that region into a different region, which makes way more sense geographically. It
Infinitely
more
more sense.
Like, in a pandemic, but whatever. It's been fixed. So this makes way more sense to me, and I am curious to see if we actually get to see Oceanic teams do things now instead of getting absolutely railed by visas trying to get into the US. Yeah. Heart go out to the Aussie crew. They're fun, man. They're fun, and they've got a lot of talent in FPS. So I'd like to see Oz teams,
and they're always riding the struggle bus just because of formats and where they're located geographically.
Yeah, they get screwed so much. There's the other thing. This is really good for me and you probably as well. There's some really brilliant broadcast talent in Australia that don't get nearly the opportunities they should because they're in Australia. So that's great for me for getting jobs. But seriously, a majorly undervalued scene in terms of the talent as well as the players. I'm a huge fan of a lot of what's going on down there. But yeah, I mean, my selfishness would love another slot for NA, but I think this distribution makes a lot of sense.
I'd like 4 slots for NA, but it's not going to happen, and it wouldn't make any sense. And honestly, if we did get 4 slots for NA, I would be weirded out by it. This is the allocation that makes the most sense across the board. Full stop.
Now just make it a 24-team tournament, 32-team tournament, 32-team Masters. Just
Bro,
make it
could
huge.
Could you imagine the logistical nightmare of trying to get that many teams
together,
like during pandemic? Like that would just be a mess, man. It's gonna be a mess trying to get all these teams together.
Yeah, no, it'll be challenging, but I think this does make a lot of sense. We'll move on now. We're kind of out of run it back, burning through our nice first half hour of the show as we typically do. Let's talk about VCT NA Challengers Open Qualifier 1, baby. Okay. Heck yeah.
It was pretty good. Good. I will say most of the matches were actually kind of slaughters, right? Like you go back and watch, like it's somewhat a one-sided affair for the most matches. Even matches where there was like one close map, the other 2 were very much not close. That being said, I think we got some. Some spice. It's just not a lot of it was about, about the actual gameplay.
The Twitter fights were close, man. Those were some real brawls going into overtime on Twitter.
Oh jeez. Before we get into that though, I like 4 teams making it out, right? Version 1, Xset, the Guard, which I know you and I are both really happy about, and then NRG, which I was actually really happy about too. F to a crew. They'll make it through the next one. I believe. I absolutely believe.
Sucks for them they came up against the Guard.
Yeah. I don't think it would have been much easier on the other side of the bracket either, right? NRG also just looked really good this tournament. I am very excited though to see who makes it out of the next one, because I feel like it has to be a crew, right? To an extent, it has to be a crew. They clapped TSM. I'm not worried about them playing T1. I'm not worried about them playing, who else made it pretty far? Knights or Sonics, right? Like, I'm on the Acrupium, right? Yeah. They got to make it through next time. There's no way they don't.
I don't think it's Acrupium. I really don't think it is. I think it's just, using your eyes and thinking.
That's fair. I don't do that often, though. So it's hard for me to just, differentiate.
You never let them know that. You got to just bullshit it. You always know what's going on. Giga brain, Giga chat, walnut brain, watermelon brain, all the stuff. We got TSM wins in the chat. Let's talk about, you know what? Yeah, sure. Screw it. Let's talk about this. T1 versus TSM Twitter drama. Woo! Let's talk about it. We'll get back to the actual other stuff, the substance of this, because this was the spice, right? So just for context, for anyone who's not following along, here's the competitive ruling from Riot. Basically, T1 got disqualified in their competition against TSM, got a result overturned that allowed TSM to continue on in the bracket because the T1's coach, David Denis, actively communicated with the player during the match. And not just that, calmed in all chat. Help sewers. Now, let me just I'm gonna hold on to the floor here for a minute, Paul, because I just want to rant
Go
about
for it.
something. First of all, genuinely, I don't think this is as big of a deal as a lot of people have made it out to be on Twitter. Here's the reality. Yes, it's against the rules. Everybody fucking does it. You know everybody fucking does it. It's online qualification. You're not going to be able to enforce it. And it's one of those rules that, yes, you have it in there. And if someone is so fucking stupid as to throw it in your face like they did during the event, yes, he should be punished. It is an absolutely deserved punishment. 100%. They messed up. But if you think loads of other teams aren't calming in similar ways, I don't know what to tell you. Like, they just are. It's one of those things that is nigh unenforceable unless someone slips up like this. And so it's just going to kind of happen. And yeah, they were dumb. Yeah, they got caught. Yes, it is absolutely against integrity and morals and ethics and all that stuff. But on the list of things that T1's coaching staff has done that's morally compromised, this isn't even on the list. Like, who cares? It's not that big a deal. They're getting punished for it. Good.
The amount of players I've seen on Twitter too who have just been like, man, if you watched every team's POV VODs, the amount of teams that you would catch doing this, there would be almost no one left in VCT. Like, I mean, and it's like you said, Mike, it's not okay to do, right? But when we have online qualifiers, there's just so many ways that you can communicate with your team, right? It's like, oh, we'll just get them in a voice channel. Make sure they're not like in Discord or something. There's other programs for voice if you want to do that way. You can text them. You could message them on another program. You could DM them on Twitter. There's no way to stop teams from communicating with their coaches. So, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
For him getting punished is absolutely what they need to do, right? Mm-hmm. It's absolutely what they need to do. And I would love for them to figure out a way that I haven't yet to stop coaches from enforcing it. But what are you going to do other than like putting the coach in like a box with a camera on and having him like hold his hands up the entire time?
I mean, that's how you do it. So we had this issue in CS, right? There was the coaching bug, there's massive cheating scandal, this whole thing. I'm not going to go over all of that on this podcast. Remember. You could go find a lot of podcasts about that. They're worth watching. Yep. What wound up happening is Valve said, no coach in the room. No coach in the room, period, during games. Never, at any point, can he communicate. There needs to be a camera of the room they're in and a camera on the other side of the room that shows their screens and setups. And there can be no one else in the room during it. And that's how they lay down the hammer. So if you really want to enforce this, you have to have permacams, which, fine. Once you get to the event, you can do. For this online open qual 256 team bracket, God, that's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, it's so many, right? Like, imagine trying to be Riot and going back and watching hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage just to make sure that every team doesn't have a coach that was... So, doing something hanky.
Here's the way you do that is you don't actually watch any of the footage. What you do is you make them record it and give it to you. And then if a complaint gets levied by the other team, then you go back and review it. So it's not we're going to check all the time. It's if we get a report or we have any reason to suspect, then we will look. And if we bust your ass, we will bust your ass hard. And then you have to start enforcing way harder, so on and so forth to disincentivize. It's a really slippery slope. Here's the reality of esports. Online will always matter less than LAN. And it's for reasons like this. It's beyond, everyone talks about cheaters and yada, yada, yada. Who cares about that? There's a million little things that you can get away with. It's an online competition that just don't work on LAN. Your coach talking, this happening, you getting comms from this, stream sniping, all this shit that's nigh impossible to enforce. It's gonna happen. Is it good? No. Is it wrong? Yes. If someone gets caught, do they get punished? Hell yeah, they do. But if you have an expectation as a player that this has never happened in any of the games you've played, you're, again, back in fairy law optimism land. It's just not reality. So that's why online results do not matter nearly as much as any sort of LAN result. Because in a LAN result, you have those variables controlled. You're in a controlled environment. You can't have the same support or little things working for you as you do online. And that's where it's put up or shut up. There's a reason we talk about prove it on LAN. There's a reason that's a thing. That's why. So we can moralize. We can go nuts about this, that, and the other thing. T1 did a real big, dumb, and stupid. And David Denis is now suspended through the next qualifier by T1 for it. He's put out an apology. We got the whole thing from them as well. It makes sense. Here we've got their statement on it. This was dumb. We take integrity important. This all does ring a little hollow since they did hire a former cheater as their assistant coach, but I won't rail on them for that one. I do it often enough. I feel weird. It feels weird defending T1, and I feel like I'm defending T1 because normally I'm like the first one to line up with a baseball bat against this guy. But it's just not that big a deal. And I get like the whole thing, but it's not that big a deal. You get punished, take the punishment. You did the crime, so on and so forth. I think this one should be put in the background, right? I don't think this needs to be brought up going forward.
Honestly, I think the biggest thing here is that like it was just in all chat, right?
Yeah,
like it's not like this was like a huge big investigation and like they had to like go back and review the footage or there was like wild accusations or anything. My man's just hit shift before enter by accident. Like that's so funny to me.
It's hilarious.
That you're using,
and it's just
that you're using like game chat for that at all when that would be a risk, right? That's just so funny to me.
I also like
it just happens in all chat.
I also like the fact that Curry put out a tweet. First of all, my advice to any of the T1 players, Curry's in particular, is when this kind of thing happens, don't tweet. Just let it happen and be done with it and move past. But that's just, Twitter life advice. But Curry put out a tweet that was something like, imagine thinking that, we paid $1 billion for Steele to not have him IGL. To have our coach IGL. It's right? Like, of course, this is just a coach making a comment at the wrong time. There's no way he's puppeteering. It's just the guy literally doesn't have the background to make that make any sense. He doesn't like his competitive experiences from like 20 years ago. He that's not what he is as a coach. I don't think. I don't know what their comms are like, but I'd be surprised.
And I want to address, I see Naori in the chat. Hi, Naori, we miss you. She said, Mitchman was saying players should be punished as well. I mean, if you can prove that they were like complicit in doing that for a while, then yeah, I'd agree with that. But, are there logs of this being a long thing? Or did he just get punished for the all chat help sewers? Like, I don't think Riot actually went back and like reviewed a ton of like footage or communication between the team during matches.
I'm sure they have the logs, and I'm sure they pulled the logs because they have access to those for every game, I think.
And if there's a bunch of like team chat logs or something where he's just talking to him the whole time and nobody was able to figure that out for some reason, then yeah, the players shouldn't be complicit in that kind of thing. But at least by what it sounds like from right now, as far as anyone can prove, it was a one-off thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't the only time, and I'm sure lots of other coaches do that kind of shit all the time.
I'm sure it wasn't.
But
it sounds like that they don't at least have evidence that it was more than like that it happened throughout this particular match. And unless you're going to go back and review every single T1 match that they played the entire qualifier, which again is just a ton of footage for Riot to try and review when you already made them FF, right?
I mean, I think you pull the chat logs if you have access to those and they're easy to get. You pull the chat logs and you look at those. But I think that, to Sam's point about Mitch Man saying the players should be punished. I love Mitch. I think we disagree on certain things when it comes to this. I know he gets real like justice bonery about these kind of things, and I get it. I understand the appeal. I understand his point of view. I don't think he's inherently wrong. I think that, if you're complicit in cheating, you should be punished. But I think that pragmatically, with these kind of online events, it's the kind of thing where you just don't look at this with a magnifying glass, because you sure as shit ain't gonna like what you find. And then once you start punishing people for this consistently, you're gonna have to punish a lot of people, and it's just not worth it for anybody, I don't think. And it's not that big of a deal. Online results don't matter as much as
there's an argument to be made that you should go through and be rigorous in punishing every team that does this. But if you're Riot and you have your your 2 years old esports ready game, right? Yeah. And you go through and you have to put the ban hammer on 10 teams at the top of your game. That's not going to be great.
VCT Open Qualifier 2 with 6 teams registered.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean,
I think they're punishing. I think he's made his mea culpa. We have the tweet longer from David Denis where he takes full responsibility, says kowtows and does his
Sure.
his Hail Marys, his penance. It's a pretty straightforward policy or apology. There's nothing really special about it. But yeah, I think this one can be a closed book. Now let's talk about the other side of this. Let's talk about TSM.
Sure.
TSM did not have the performance they were looking for in this qualifier. They got hot Twitter fingers, much hotter than they are in the server. They were tweeting mid-match about this stuff, which, like, I get it. It was a violation. It was an obvious, blatant rule violation. Like, absolutely report it. But, they're fighting a lot of battles on Twitter when they should maybe be focused in the server at times. And I think that's been a consistent issue for this TSM roster.
And, I think at this point, I kind of want to just like transition away from the like Twitter drama and just talk about like the actual teams.
Yeah.
And TSM, I think, is a great place to start because we, when Anders was on the show last week, we were talking about like all the concerns we had for the roster, right? A lot of those manifested, and then a lot of other problems were there as well, right? Like, I remember I went back and I watched like the TSM games where they were winning and losing.
Yeah.
And I just remember banging my head into the freaking wall because I don't know how they mess up the simplest part of like being a tier 1 team in Valorant, which is just having a decent team comp. Like not even to the point where it's like, oh, you need like the optimal comp, like you're doing, big brain fanatic kind of, we want a specific fracture strat, right? It's like they don't have an entry a lot of the time. They're playing like double flashes, double sentinel on some of these maps. Like what is going on? Why is this the comp, the hill you've chosen to die on? Wardell is on Chamber, and nobody else's roles are consistent across any of the other maps. Actually, that's not true. Rossi is also consistently playing smokes. But other than that, right? Like
not always. He plays Sentinel sometimes.
Did he? I didn't see any of the games where he plays Sentinel. Oh no, he played Killjoy. You're totally right. I had it written down. Yeah. Everybody's on every single role, and I don't know how this is so complicated, right? Corey has been playing the Raze and the Jet. Just make him your entry full time. Just make him your entry full time. There is not a single map in Valorant right now where it is not beneficial to run a comp without a Jet or a Raze because it's just you don't get the same kind of space. You don't get the same kind of aggression. I cannot fathom why they are running him on KO alongside Breach on some maps and then not having an entry whatsoever. Yeah. It seems like such a fundamental thing to mess up at this point.
Yeah. We had a lot of questions and concerns about this roster heading into the first qualifier. And I think the first qualifier just reinforced every doubt and answered no questions, right? Like, you've got coaches promoted up from the academy squad. You've got a young 18-year-old in-game leader, theoretically leading the show here. And then you've got two incredibly strong personalities in Wardell and Subrosa. Another apparently incredibly strong personality in Corey, from what we've heard, right? Yeah. Like, this is just, it's a weirdly built roster. There's a lot of pulls in a lot of directions at once. And I nothing about that first qualifier gave me hope. That this is going to be an interesting team to watch. So we'll see if they can.
Wardell looks really good. I'll give him that. Like, I understand why they want Wardell on Chamber the whole time.
Sure.
Because his Chamber was cracked, right? It's exactly what you wanted his Chamber to be. He was hardly missing a shot. But the problem is, right? Like,
you got to do more.
It seems like they've just isolated that from their composition and like, all right, Wardell will do this, and then we build the rest. How, like, what? They're not like fundamentally setting up their compositions to pivot around Wardell on the Chamber. If they were like, hey, we want Wardell to just pop off and we're constantly going to get like funnel him resources, I'd be cool with that. Yeah. But it seems like it's just like a pug team that is a bunch of really cracked players that haven't decided or that haven't made proper decisions based on their compositions.
Yeah. So if there's a message going into qualifier 2, starts tomorrow, obviously not a lot of time to improve things. My general message to TSM players, if for some bizarre reason they wind up listening to this, uninstall Twitter on your phones. for the whole weekend. Just block the website on your browsers. Just don't do it. If you want to, get your team manager or somebody to tweet all of the like good game after messages for all of you, do that. But literally just turn it off for a weekend and focus in here and think about the compositions and just, yes, if someone cheats against you again, report it to the admins. Absolutely. But then try and beat them in the server and then deal with the aftermath of getting it overturned afterwards. Try and beat them in the server first.
TSM didn't get a single big win, right?
Yeah,
they got upset by Knights. They barely beat LG. Yep. They got the FF from T1, and then they lost to a crew.
They got rolled.
That was their qualifier. They didn't even get knocked out by like the big teams, right?
Nope.
They didn't get knocked out by anybody who qualified.
Nope, it's not good. It's really not a good look, and it's kind of what we expected. Let's talk about the teams that qualified, though, because I kind of split past this to go to the T1 versus TSM. Version 1, XSET, the Guard, NRG. I think the XSET one is the quickest one to talk about because they ended the year strong. They picked up Cryocells, made that move. He's cracked and nuts.
Yep.
They look stronger. Holy cow, XSET has just been consistently building this team better and better and better since last year, and they're just still on that upward trajectory, and it doesn't seem like anything's changed.
Nah, XSET still, I mean, like you said, it's really easy to talk about XSET. They looked good, even against like some of the other good teams, just nobody could come close to them, right?
Yeah.
They made NRG and the Guard look like chumps, and both those teams were qualified through the lower bracket, right? Wow, XSET definitely did look good, but we also kind of expected that to a degree, right? I don't think there was much doubt in XSET coming into this qualifier that they were going to be the ones, or they were going to be one of the teams to qualify.
Yes.
It's just good to see them do it in such a dominant fashion.
My prediction for XSET is just that they establish themselves as one of the top 3 teams, sort of undisputed in North America by the end of year. That's just how I feel about this team. They continue to make good decisions, reasonable decisions. They have a consistent plan and way to go there. And they're doing a great job of building this team, and it continues to do so. Now let's talk about version 1. Another team that made a change, brought in, cracked out youth in Xander. He showed up very well for them. Yeah. And version 1 impressed. So let's talk about version 1 here, Paul.
Version 1 were the biggest surprise for me heading into this week. Like, I never thought version 1 would be bad by any stretch of the imagination.
Sure.
But they kind of like took my breath away. They stole my heart a little bit watching some of those matches. Like, I watched their crew match. Their defense on Haven. Oh my. It was so tasty. Every single thing, every player's position was perfectly calculated in every single round, right? To break it all down, I would need a lot of time. But like the amount of practice that they have clearly put in, the amount of macro work, the depth of their playbook, I love seeing teams that prepare, right? Teams with strategies beyond, hey, we have some cracked players, let's just go in and mid-round it, right? It just looked so good. Their rotations were perfect. I loved every single setup they had on defensive Haven. It was juicy. I am surprisingly excited to watch version 1 go up against like some of the really big teams when the like actual, like once we get past the open qualifiers. Yeah. I am at this point actually expecting version 1 to make some pretty decent waves.
Hell yeah. I mean, you look at what they did, undefeated run through the upper bracket where you beat a crew who
they didn't even drop a map, right?
You beat, didn't drop a map. You beat Rise as well, 2-0. Like, those are 2 strong teams. Like, yes, maybe they didn't have to go up against any of the other qualified teams, but you didn't play pushovers.
You beat Rise and a crew. Yeah, that's good enough.
Not pushovers,
right?
Not pushovers. You made a good run. You made a really strong run here. They made a very strong case for themselves going forward as well. Yeah. So very excited about version 1. Let's talk about NRG, because I know you were also very pleasantly surprised with NRG. Yeah. They made a good run, I would say.
And this is, I actually didn't think that NRG was going to qualify. But okay. I'm happy for them, right? Like the interview at the very end with Hayes, I think was really wholesome. It was good to see him like get back up into the top and like talk about last year, how like he knew, hey, him and all the players that he played with were really good. It just didn't fit together at the time. So it's good to see him on a roster that is fitting together, where, I think he has a lot of impact despite what he would tell you in the interviews, where he remains very humble. Since Hayes just got introduced to that NRG roster, I feel like I say it every time we talk about NRG, but I'm going to say it one more time. Since Hayes just got on that roster, I feel like they just look better every single week, right? They look more put together. They look more decisive, and their playbook is constantly expanding. Their synergy is constantly expanding. I'm excited to see where NRG goes. I'm not quite as hopeful for them as I am for like V1 or XSET, obviously, but they had a really good first qualifier, and I hope they can ride the momentum.
I think that there's on the subject of NRG and on the subject of Hayes in particular, I think it's great for Hayes that he is away from this dysfunction that was clearly TSM last year, and especially by the end there, right? And we're seeing it bleed into this year and yada, yada, yada. That's enough harping on TSM. I've done enough. Stop. They're already dead. But what this seems to have solved, or hopefully solved, is NRG's dysfunction. Because last year, it was the, wheel of players. Like, who's on the roster this week? Constantly making changes, never really seeming to have a set plan going forward, consistently able to do it. Now they've qualified, so you can chill the hell out on that. No one needs to make a roster change. You found a 5 that at least worked to some degree. Now you can continue to build. And as you said, improve week to week. So this is very encouraging, because NRG always had all of this talent, but just never seemed to have the consistent roster where we could see that improvement week to week. We were always thinking, okay, well, what does this new pick mean? What does this new change mean? And that's not growth. That's just trying a different formula and hoping for the best, right? This is
throwing
growth.
darts at the board.
Yes. Now it's growth. All right. Now it's time to talk about the team I'm going to simp over. The Guard, baby!
Yeah.
The Guard! They make it through! Oh, yeah! 5 guys came together over this last year. They made a roster change not that long ago. They built the structure. They got the coach at MCE. They qualified. Trent is cracked. Trent is nuts.
Trent's
This
crazy,
dude they found from nowhere. They made him magic, right? Like, this team is awesome. I love it. I love this new team popping off early on. And, MCE, the hard ass that he is as a coach, I was messaging him like, great performance, looking awesome out there. I think I used the word polished at some point. He just goes, if you think this is polished, I can't wait till you see what we look like when we're actually figuring things out. So he does not think that this is the state the team wants to be in by any measure. Like, they're going to keep working. They're going to keep grinding here. I like the title there, Cody.
I think that's really fair for Guard fanboy time. I think that's really fair for the Guard, because I feel like they peak really hard in a lot of their maps, and then they'll like kind of flounder around for a while. They don't look perfect yet, but they look really good. And the rounds they're winning, they absolutely fucking dumpster everybody, right? Like, the rounds they're winning, like, somebody's getting a 4K, and it can be anybody on the roster. You can literally look at anyone on this team and be like, yeah, I'm not surprised that they popped off, right? Valen, Jonah P, Saya Player, Trent, Net, all of them have moments where they just come out of nowhere and win rounds that they straight up shouldn't. And there's a lot of really good stuff happening in terms of the macro too. I think this team they're one of the better teams in terms of playing off of each other in like situations that I feel like other teams wouldn't be prepared for, right? Like, it looks, at least from like the eye test, that there's a lot of audibles being called on like swings and mid rounds, and they just commit to it, right? Like, somebody says, hey, I want to swing this, and suddenly 3 players are there making a great play, and it gets them a really cool advantage. So I'm excited to see like the full version of that, because keep in mind, this team's only been together for a month, right? They had a trend a month ago. That's it. Before that, they were only together for like 2 weeks. It's been like 6 weeks since this team actually got like announced with 5 players, and then they made a change. So there is so much room to grow for the Guard, and for them to be so good already is so exciting. Also, as a like OG Overwatch boy, it's so vindicating to see Saya Player on a team where he's not playing smokes and just forced to sit in the back.
Yes.
It is so vindicating to watch him on Jet just dumpster everyone. Anyways, that's my little fanboy moment.
No, absolutely. I think that the thing as well about the Guard, right? Like, is obviously we saw the match that they lose against XSET, where that is a really good XSET team, right?
Yeah,
and that's where you see them the inexperience exposed, the mistakes exposed, and I think that is going to be the match that they can point to, where they're like, there's a ton that we still need to improve. And that's the motivation to improve, because this next level, you're not going to be playing, your as much as I love them, a Cruise where there's a little less experience and there's, there's a little less, shall we say, name brand on some of those players. You're not going to be playing those kind of teams. You're going to be playing the XS. You're going to be playing the teams that have qualified to champs before or nearly qualified to it. That's who you're up against next. That's the next step that they're trying to take. So now that they've qualified, you can take some time. You can really start to refine those protocols, refine those plans, and remind you, so many of these kids are young and inexperienced, and you're going to have to get that together. But the future is so bright. The future is so dang bright, and I'm really excited for this team. And
I'm so stoked.
That's me simping. So enough simping here. I think we've done enough VCT. There's a lot. There's one other thing that's of note. Chamber got played a ton. There's a great Nerd Street article looking at the numbers on that from Brian. You can find that on nerdstreet.com. Maybe we can post the link in chat. But Chamber emerges during NA VCT Open Qualifiers. So I was just talking about how important he was as an operator. Do you like the meta that we've got emerging around Chamber here, Paul?
I like it if for no other reason than we get more Sentinel diversity, right? I feel like this really lets teams kind of pivot into their own styles when it comes to this is kind of what I want out of every role, ideally speaking, right? I mean, it depends on the map, obviously, but it's good to see teams picking up Chamber, like some teams, not TSM, but some teams picking up Chamber on some maps, then swapping over to Killjoy, then swapping over to Cypher. I really like it because it allows an individual player to focus on what they want to do the most, right? Do you feel like you want some map control, but your Sentinel player is not really the type to like IGL or play for info? Instead, you want them like being a little bit more aggressive, throw them on the Chamber. You maybe want a little bit more info, you can get the Cypher or the Killjoy. You want some hard stops on a site when you go to like Ascent or Split, then you really get the Killjoy going too, right? So I really like that we're getting a relatively even spread of those three. And of course, Chamber, I don't think it's terribly surprising that he comes in to the fray, right? I feel like if nothing else, he's a great agent for economy. So, if you don't know what you want to do with your Sentinel, you get some really nice eco rounds out of like Tour de Force and the Headhunter. So
I love that. I think Chamber is the ultimate synthesis of that old meme of, let's make it clear in Project A, abilities don't kill people, guns kill people. Well, his abilities are guns, and he kills people with them. His ability is a gun.
It works.
So it's both. It's all of the above. And I enjoy Chamber just because you do kind of gotta shoot with him. Can't just click a kill button on a corner. You gotta shoot. You shoot good. You got good shoots, but you do gotta shoot. So that speaks to me.
For sure.
One last question before we move on here. We've seen this qualifier format play out here, this open qualifier format. We got another one this weekend. Do you like the format?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, compared to everything else we've ever had in open qualifiers for VCT, yes. I'll double bracket or double elim bracket, round of 32. It's just perfect. There is no need for this to change anytime soon.
Yeah. I think they found a good formula.
The first two rounds, nobody got upset. Right? Everybody made it to the round of 32 that was supposed to, more or less, at least off the top of my head. I can't think of any big team that flopped out. And then we get to the round of 32 and things actually got interesting, right? There were some teams that ended up losing out pretty early, right? Just because they got matched against a hard target. And then they did pretty decent in the lower bracket. Admittedly, like nobody who lost in the round of 32 ended up going to qualify or anything crazy, but I don't think you need to move that back at all. I don't think it needs to be like round of 16 is where the double bracket starts. I think it's just great. It's just great.
Round of 32 is where you get the really meaningful games, right? Where even if it's a team that's a lower tier team, they're a team that has the upset potential to push higher.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm with you. Just a great format. We'll move on here. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I figured that would be your response, but I wanted to see if you had any views on it.
Yeah. No.
We got some stuff to blow through here.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up, endorse. Good job, Rito. Good job. Game Changers EMEA, that's happening. It's midway through. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I'll be honest, I don't know much about it. We don't have Sam. So when the event concludes next week, Sam will probably be able to talk about it a bit more. But this is happening. Watch the games. They're good games. I don't think there's too many upsets. So we'll sort of move on.
Doesn't look like it. Yeah, G2's up there. Guild X, 10s. I mean, I don't know the scene as well as Sam does, obviously. But it looks to me like most of the big teams are making it through how they should.
Now, moving on, we got the VRLs going on. Those are happening. This is the regional tournaments where a few teams are going to be able to qualify into the promotion tournament, and then only 2 will be able to actually make it into the VCT. So this is sort of the last chance, but regionally dished out. And we've already got some teams that can't make it. Northern Europe, Vexed and Goosehouse can't make it. No huge losses there, I don't think. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see who actually does make it out of these. But these are interesting so far. Any hot takes on the VRLs?
I have not. But between casting Collegiate Valorant and trying to catch up on VCT, I have not had a chance to go back and watch any of the VRL games yet.
My hot take is stop with the 3-letter acronyms. There's too many, and they all start with V.
I will never
Jesus
not
Christ.
mess up VRL versus VLR, dude.
And
Every single time.
VCT and like there's too many. There's too many 3-letter acronyms that start with V. Start going with a different naming convention here.
We need we need like an actual name, right? Like a 1-word or a 2-word like name for some of these tournaments.
Something else. I don't even care what it is, just something else. All right, and now we'll talk about the last thing before we wrap up, which is that Winter Champs is happening next week. It is happening. We got most of our teams. There's some pretty spicy names in there. The guard from the guard is there, so I'll be able to think about that a little bit more. I mean, we got some rosters
V1
in this
Xset, right?
Yeah,
like adds. That's pretty tasty. Just looking at, and that's just the day 1 stuff, right? Like, because there are a couple other teams that are waiting until day 2 because of like they or at least I think based on like what I've looked at from the format, right? Like you've got like a crew and Renegades and BBG Academy. It looks like waiting for day 2. So that's going to be pretty tasty. I'm really looking forward to, I think, playoffs in that, right? Because I think that's when we're going to get our most spicy matches. But also day 2 groups is going to be really interesting, just depending on how things get seeded from day 1. It'll be interesting to see teams like V1 and Xset end up in groups with like a crew, right? And I want to see some of these guys play each other. The VCT qualifier was awesome. But one of the things about it being a qualifier is we don't get like the completion of the bracket. We don't go all the way. It's just you qualify, boom, we're done, which is, what it should do. But I want to see version 1 and Xset and the guard all go up against each other and NRG too. I think that'll be really fun to watch. Those are going to be great matches.
Absolutely, that's where the focus has to be is the qualified teams as a pulse check headed into challenges, and then the question becomes, how much gamesmanship comes into that, strat saving, those kind of things. Like how much are you just trying to let it all hang out, and how much are you trying to keep in reserve, especially if you come up against those teams. So there's going to be some interesting details to watch from a gamesmanship perspective. That starts on the 7th. Which is what day of the week?
Next Monday.
Okay. So it starts on the 7th. Be sure to tune into the Winter Champs games. You're going to want to watch those. So we've got VCT this weekend. And then at the beginning of next week,
it just immediately rolls in. It's crazy.
Packed calendar, man. What more could you want? What more could you want as a Valorant fan? There's so much to watch. So looking into the future, obviously the second qualifier starts tomorrow. Be sure to watch that. That's going to be bonkers. The first few rounds, do you really need to watch specific games, or can you just watch the bloodbath on the bracket? But then once we get into the round of 32, that's where the spice starts to happen. And then next week, obviously, Winter Champs. Be sure to tune in for that. This should be really interesting as well. That's going to wrap up our show. If you enjoyed the show, we always enjoy doing it. Be sure to tune in every week at 1 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. I won't be on the next one. I'm on a plane, but it'll be Paul and Sam and maybe a guest. Maybe someone come in. We'll see. But that's going to be it. Follow Nerd Street on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. You can find our hats down below our faces. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.